As a scientist, I can tell you that Sundays are only 24 hours long. But with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get every game every Sunday all in one place. That's upwards of 30 hours of NFL in one day. How can there be 30 hours in 24 hours, you ask? I have a theory. Magic. New users get NFL Sunday Ticket for 8 payments of $34.50 per month. Sign up at NFLSundayTicket.com. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games and commercial use. Terms and embargoes apply. Availability varies.
Vitamin Water Zero Sugar has great taste, zero BS, and obviously zero sugar. For those with zero room in their calendar. Zero patience for slow walkers. Those who get 0 hours of sleep on a Saturday night. Have zero filter, zero given, and zero interest in grabbing a plain, boring water. Grab a delicious Vitamin Water Zero Sugar today.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros. Word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of How We're the Podcast. It's Martin here. And look, things can happen pretty quickly in football, can't they? So yesterday, Monday morning, me, Andrew and Bomber sat down to record the podcast that was going to go out today. We'd had a pretty quiet week or so on the transfer front, and we thought it was relatively safe to record a mid-pre-season review less than 24 hours before this one would go live. But of course, as we all should have known, things changed pretty dramatically, because just after we finished recording, around lunchtime on Monday, the news broke, and Fabrizio Romano tweeted, "Here we go," telling us that Granit Xhaka's deal had all been agreed with Leverkusen, and he was flying over to Wayside to do his medical and to sign today. So all being well, we haven't had official confirmation of that yet, but hopefully at some point today we should get the official tweet and an article on the club website. And look, we've already seen this pre-season with Loriente. That's not all done until it's done, but wow. This signing of Xhaka is massive if it comes off, and I can't overstate how big I think this is. I'm actually struggling to think of a bigger and more high-profile signing in the 40-odd years I've been watching us play. Like Stefan Schwartz might be one that comes close, but I think this exceeds it. You know, he was 16th on the Ballon d'Or list this season. He's a player who would get into pretty much every single Premier League midfield. It's massive. It's a massive statement signing. And not only will he add to the team in terms of footballing ability, he'll add to us as a leadership, in a leadership role. And look, we talk about this on the podcast that we're going to roll with in a second. But also, I think it'll really elevate the club in the eyes of other signings too. So this could genuinely be a turning point in the club's history. And yesterday afternoon, we were also linked with Real Madrid striker Gonzalo Garcia. He played for Real at the Club World Cup and he scored a few goals. I think we put a £13 million bid in for him with a few extras and a buyback clause. So yeah, look, things happen quickly in football. And while that news dates this recording that you're about to hear a little bit, and we do speak for a while about the potential signing of Xhaka and the impact that he could have and that need for experience. And I'll have to admit, Bomber and Andrew were a little bit more confident in this one coming off than I was. So fair play to them. Bomber had put his Hercule Poirot cap on and looked for a couple of clues in Leverkusen's friendly as to why Xhaka could still be on the move. So fair play to Bomber. And also, even bigger news on the transfer front broke after all of this, because Mason Burstow left Hull for Bolton, which kind of scuppered the end of the pod too, but I'm sure you will still enjoy listening, especially with knowledge that, all being well, Granit Xhaka will very soon be announced as a Sunderland player. So having said all of that, let's get on with the show. Hello, it's Martin here and welcome to another episode of How We're the Podcast. And we are joining you before the Hull game. Obviously, this is going out on Tuesday morning, so before the Hull friendly. And we are going to have a little bit of a look back over pre-season so far. We've hit the halfway point in terms of the games that we have lined up. And we'll go into some transfer rumours and all that sort of stuff. So to help me do that today is, first of all, Andrew Smithson. How are you, Andrew?
Not bad at all, thanks. Yourself?
Yes, I'm very good. Thank you, mate. And also another person who I actually think we should change the name of How We Hear the Podcast to the Bombercast, because even I went down to the gym this morning. I listened to the end of one episode and the start of another one, and there's Bomber's dulcet tones. So it's lucky that you've got such a nice voice, mate.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I'll take it, Mark. Yeah, I seem to be going for some sort of consecutive podcast record, or maybe I'm just too needy and too available. I need to play a bit more hard to get when Gav's asking for people to come on.
I think you're going to steal Johnny's crown, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going for it.
But look, as I said, we are recording this on Monday morning. So look, if we end up signing a raft of players on Monday afternoon, please bear that in mind. But what we are going to do today is obviously have a little bit of a chat through pre-season so far. We are halfway through pretty much. We've had the South Shields friendly, we've had the 2 games in the Algarve, and we've had the game up at Tynecastle on Saturday. So, in terms of pre-season so far, Andrew, what's your feeling? What's your consensus? How do you think it's gone?
I think if you look at it purely on paper, there'd be a couple of concerns. I think if you see a 3-0 loss, that always jumps out as a bad thing. But I don't think within the squad and within the coaching staff they'll be too concerned. I do think at this stage it is mainly knocking off the rust and getting back into the swing of things. I would say that pre-season is pretty much always going to be geared to the first couple of matches in the actual season. And as long as the team are ready for that, I don't think we need to be too downhearted at present. But yeah, I do appreciate I'm saying that, having just lost 3-0. So yeah.
And it's an interesting one, Bomber, isn't it? Because you kind of preach this this attitude to pre-season, especially when you get beat. Well, the games don't matter. It's more important that the players get fit. It's minutes in the legs. We avoid injuries, all that sort of stuff. But the results matter to some degree.
They do to some degree, Mark. Yeah, but I might be. I might be kind of just about to cancellate what I was about to say, but they do to a certain degree. But I think it's the manner in which, particularly in defeats, it's the manner in which those defeats happen and whether there is some sort of mitigation. And I've said 2 or 3 times when we were previewing the Hearts game, and then when I was reacting to it with Johnny as well, is that there are a number of caveats to that game. That the result, in my opinion at least, doesn't really matter. Just as the same as the result, whether we beat Sporting Lisbon or not doesn't really matter. That I know the result was. What am I trying to say? The performance didn't suggest of a 1-1 draw or suggest that there was anything to be concerned about. In fact, it was quite the opposite, and it was something to be excited about. And I'm not willing to let that go just on the back of a Hearts testimonial. I won't repeat myself too much about what I did and what I said reacting to it, but in terms of that match, you've got Craig Gordon coming off after 1 minute, you've got Siddiqui coming off, coming back on again, and everything else that goes around with it. It was quite clear, to me at least anyway, that it wasn't necessarily the competitive friendly that we'd all hoped it might have been. And that it was a little bit more of a testimonial vibe, and we were using it for minutes in legs. Of course, there'll be people who look at that result in isolation, and it will tarnish what's gone on beforehand. And I think it's important that we look at that kind of bigger picture and say, well, look, we've had some very, very good results in the Algarve, some very, very good performances in the Algarve. Is it just a post-holiday blues? We've come back from Portugal, back to the reality, back to the grind of, okay, we're back in the Northeast, back in the Academy of Light. Then we're travelling up to Scotland. The most important thing for me, I think, is how we react to this whole game. And I'm not sure. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I'm not sure how we're going to set up and how we're going to treat that particular game.
a couple of the things that really sort of stood out in the Hearts game when you look at it were the two ends of the field. In terms of defensively, we looked a bit shaky, and up front, we didn't really create them a great deal of problems. We didn't look like scoring. I think, really, if you look at the games that we played, especially the two games in the Algarve and the Hearts game, Bomber, you, me, and Gav spoke after the game against, who did we play? The second game in the Algarve where we got beat.
Sporting. Sporting, yeah.
Yeah. But there was an awful lot of positives to take out of that in terms of how the midfield is set up and how they were sort of connected together and all that sort of thing. But a lot of the transfer rumours that we've had, over the past few weeks and, even this morning when you're looking at stuff, are around the defence and the goalkeeper. There's a new keeper from Shakhtar Donetsk has been linked over the weekend. Dimitro Riznik, and the Bologna centre-back, Jean Lucchemi, the Colombian lad. There's also a striker from Metz, 18-year-old Senegalese international, Idrissa Gueye, I think, or Gaira. But you can kind of see where the club are concentrating, and hopefully the people who are making the approaches to the players can pronounce the names better than I can. But you can kind of see where the club obviously see the gaps are in the team. Is it fair to say that's where we kind of need to concentrate our transfer activity over the next couple of weeks in advance of the West Ham game?
I think so. I think that's fairly obvious. The club have obviously made it a priority to strengthen that centre midfield, and I think they've done a fantastic job in doing that. I think there's still definitely work to be done at the back. Jury's out. Well, no, actually, no, it's not out. There's still definitely work to be done in the goalkeeping department as well, because even if Anthony Patterson steps up and becomes a Premier League goalkeeper, or the Premier League goalkeeper that we all hope he steps up to be, it's quite evident that, Blondie and Simon Moore and the likes aren't going to be cut it at that level. So even if we're not signing somebody to be our number one, we need somebody to push Pato on. So that's a priority. And like you said, at the other end of the field as well, goals have been a little bit hard to come by, and Mayanda hasn't really got going yet. I think he's one. He seems to be a player who needs a goal or two, and then they'll come like public transport buses. But it's what I'm getting, or the impression that I'm getting from watching these games in pre-season, is that over the course of a 38-game Premier League season, Eliza Mayanda isn't and shouldn't be the person to try and play 38 games and score 20 goals to try and keep us in the division. He's going to need some support. There's a chance, as with anybody, that he might miss a part of the season through injury. So that if him and Isidore, or one of them, were to even go off for a prolonged period of time, I'd be really worried about our ability to pick up points during that time. So yeah, those two need to be a priority now. I think the centre midfield is sorted. We can leave that alone as long as the likes of Daniel signs a new contract and we don't lose Chris Rigg to someone or anyone else who can play in that centre midfield. That's done. I think that's pretty locked up. It's those forward positions and the goalkeeper in particular that I'm most concerned about, along with probably a centre back.
And over the weekend, obviously we've been linked with Granit Xhaka quite significantly, and it's been made public that he wants to come to the club. He played for Leverkusen on Sunday, and I think the manager of Leverkusen is very adamant in the fact that he doesn't want to lose Granit Xhaka. He's lost a few players, and I think he's kind of putting his foot down, really, isn't he, and saying that he doesn't want him to leave. He said he's got 3 years left on his contract with Leverkusen, and they're simply not going to sell him. And when you talk about the midfield, Bomber, we have made a lot of good signings. And, again, we talked after one of the pre-season games, and we were extolling the virtues of all the new signings coming in, extolling the virtues of Enzo Lefebvre playing there. And that was before the news about us wanting Granit Xhaka kind of broke. And the interesting thing for me is, yes, he would be fantastic as a player to come into the side. You're talking about one of the 16th best player in the world, according to some lists or other. But it's the experience that he brings, which I think would be the biggest thing that we benefit from. And that experience is going to be incredibly important, isn't it, going into the new season? You've got the left back from Atletico Madrid, Ronaldo, who's vastly experienced, but you get the sense, Andrew, that we kind of are looking to buy experience as well as the quality player. And obviously, you hope those two things go hand in hand. But that experience, and adding that experience, looks to be massively important.
Yeah, it is. And I think we all probably appreciated that prior to the game against Hearts and the trip to Portugal and what have you. So this isn't something new. The club have probably been looking at this for quite a while now. I wouldn't be too concerned about Xhaka playing for his current club. If nothing else, it tells me that he's a professional, and that if he was to come to Sunderland, he'd be in decent nick and have a bit of fitness about him. I wonder as well if playing him is perhaps a tactic from Leverkusen to say, look, he's still part of our plan, so if you're desperate to bring him in, come on, show us the cash. The club have identified that as a little bit of a weak spot, and I think would get somebody in with a similar CV and who's got an equally good level of nous about them, and perhaps that those leadership skills this young team is going to need. I think that was something that Briss might have said after the Hearts game as well, that we could do with just a little bit more experience. And yeah, whether that's Xhaka or whether that's somebody else, I think that will be an important part of the jigsaw.
I think we need one, Andrew, Martin, either one centre back or one centre midfielder who has 100 Premier League games under their belt. So whether that's Granit Xhaka or whether we bring somebody in as a centre back, it needs somebody in that spine and not at the extremities of the pitch. So I'm talking goalkeeper, striker. So it needs a centre back or a centre midfielder who's got that experience, who knows what the Premier League is about, and fits the mould of being a professional footballer. To come in and just obviously help on the pitch, but also help off the pitch as well, and help these players who are playing Premier League football for the first time understand and prepare for life in the Premier League. Because everything, not just on the pitch, everything off the pitch just grows exponentially. All the media exposure, all the coverage that they're going to get on Sky Sports News now, all the coverage you're going to get on Soccer Saturday, all the critical analysis on Match of the Day that hasn't happened for them before. It's that. It's not just the game being faster, more physical, etc. It's everything else that goes with it. I think we're crying out for it. I really hope it's still Granit Xhaka, because I can't think of anybody at the moment that we possibly could get that would be more perfect. The one thing that I felt was quite interesting, and it might be me reading into it about Granit Xhaka last night, is obviously Leverkusen have lost their vice captain. They're about to lose their captain. Ten Hag is talking about how important Granit Xhaka is to the team and he's not going anywhere. And yet Robert Andrich was named as the captain for yesterday. Whereas Xhaka played 77 minutes, got substituted off, and what I thought it was a little bit. It made me think it was posturing from Ten Hag, saying he was unavailable rather than him genuinely being unavailable. Because if I felt Granit Xhaka was that important to me and I wanted to keep hold of him, and I'd lost my captain and my vice captain, he would be my next pick. And Robert Andrich's a good defender, but just for a statement, I would have made him captain at least for that game before deciding on a new club captain. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but that's how
getting me hopes up, Bomber. You're getting me hopes up.
Yeah, I'm ever the optimist, Mark.
I think you make a lot of really good, important points there, Bomber, mate. I think there is an element of posturing from Leverkusen in terms of Xhaka. You'd be more concerned if we made an approach for a player and the selling club were pushing him out of the door almost. You'd be thinking, hey, what's happening here? Are they a bit of a bad apple? In terms of experience and Premier League know-how, you're dead right. It's not just on the pitch we need a voice. We need somebody around the training ground just keeping people together. Because there might be a time when we go 2 or 3 games without a win. We haven't done that too often in the last Maybe we did under Beale. But there's a lot of
the end of last season.
Yes, well, those games didn't count, so we'll not include them in any analysis. But yeah, you do need just one or two wise heads around the place who say, "Don't worry, lads, this is normal. Things can turn around." Just to keep the mood up and keep people focused. And yeah, you're dead right. That's as important off the pitch as it is in the actual games.
And do you know what? I actually think it extends even further than that. It actually extends into like managing the fans as well. Like, do you remember when Roy Keane came in? When Roy Keane came in and took us to the Premier League, he was in charge and he was actually managing expectation, managing everybody. And because of his profile and because of what he'd achieved in the game and because of his experience in the Premier League exceeded our experience in the Premier League, we all listened to him. And, obviously people still got a bit disappointed after a defeat or took issue with a signing or whatever, but by and large, everybody, especially in that first season, everybody listened to him. And the reason that we stayed up that season was because we were able to grind out games. We scored lots of last-minute goals. We got scored lots of last-minute goals coming up as well as staying in the Premier League because everybody was believing that Roy Keane knew what he was talking about. All the fans were believing that this fella knows what he's talking about. He's been there, done it, bought the T-shirt. And I actually think that is a massive thing that we need to bring into the club. And, if that's Xhaka, brilliant, because he's pretty vocal out in the media and all that sort of stuff. He'll talk to things. And I think, having somebody who's been at Arsenal for that length of time, being at Leverkusen and played at the top level, we're actually bringing in somebody who is above even where the most optimistic of fans think we should be this season. And I actually think that sort of voice is going to be critically important to see us through those tough times because, if we only go through spells of losing 2 or 3 games in a row this season, I'll be pretty happy come the end of the season because the reality is, or not winning for 2 or 3 games, because the reality is we're probably going to go through spells longer than that. And it's going to be a real endurance battle for some, we'd all love to go, right, we're going to finish 10th. We're going to get 15 wins on the board or 20 wins on the board, and it's going to all be plain sail, and the feel-good atmosphere from the playoffs is going to sail through. It's not going to be like that, or the chance of it being like that are bloody slim. So having that voice and that presence to actually kind of steer everybody in the right direction and give somebody context to what we're doing and what we're trying to do, because it's like the be-all and end-all isn't this season. Obviously, all of us want us to stay up convincingly and not have to go through any heartache or last-minute dramas or end of the season drama. But, the odds are that it's going to be a tough season. And, we kind of need those voices.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I think it is important that we manage those expectations. As I said on one of the 7,000 podcasts I've been on in the last week, we're still kind of, or up until the Hearts game, we were still kind of in party mode from that Dan Ballard header. And I think Hearts has been a bit of a reality check. I think there's been a massive overreaction to that Hearts result and that Hearts performance. And we've become too accustomed with the new signings and with everything else, and the really good job that the club's social media have done at building this feel good factor around the club and growing that wave of optimism and excitement that we had from Wembley and keeping it going through the summer and building it up to this first game of the season. I think it's very important that we don't lose that. But when the inevitable comes, and like you said, Mark, we lose 3 in a row, 4 in a row, you haven't got to think that far back. You think of Southampton and Leicester and the number of games in a row that they didn't pick up points for. The reality is that our season could be like that. And if it does end up being like that, not for us to get completely despondent and start calling for the board and Lebrise's head and for players to come out and that certain players are rubbish, etc., etc. Now more than ever, even in League One seasons, even in Championship seasons, now more than ever, it needs a fan base to really push the lads on, particularly in the home games. Away support will take care of itself, but in the home games, it's really important that we build an atmosphere in that stadium that is supportive, so that even when we go 6 games, if we go 6 games without a win, and then all of a sudden, Wolves come to the stadium alight, and the expectation is that we win, and we go 1-0 down, and then everyone starts booing or leaving, etc., etc. That isn't helping anybody. By doing that, you're not making a statement. You're not doing anything really other than souring the atmosphere and the confidence of the players on the pitch. So I think that's a really important message, is that just because the Hearts game, it didn't go to plan, let's just appreciate that we're a Premier League club and appreciate what the Premier League is now, and not get carried away thinking that, with the signings that we've made, we're guaranteed top 10. And then when it doesn't happen, or it doesn't look like it's going to happen, we don't get all kind of doom-mongering and catastrophize what's going on at the club.
And Andrew, what do you think in terms of expectations for the season? And again, bearing in mind that we could sign a whole other load of new players by the time we face West Ham. But, what is a realistic expectation for the season, do you reckon? Because, you read some things where we were favourites to get relegated, favourites to finish bottom. And then other things where people are going, well, the amount of money being placed on Sunderland to finish in the top 10 is the largest amount of money that's been put on football in the last 2 weeks. So, what's the reality from your perspective? Because you can only have expectations from your own perspective, can't you? But how do you see it?
I'm the wrong person to ask about reality, because I am so pro Sunderland. I do still see us as challenging up at the top. I fully appreciate what you're saying, lads. We could be in a relegation scrap. I don't see us being second bottom, going 9 or 10 weeks without a win. I'd like to think we could be kind of, how you split the Premier League into thirds. You've got your top group, you've got your middle, and you've got your bottom group. I can see us being one of the better teams in that bottom tranche, or maybe just squeaking into that middle group. I can genuinely see that, but that doesn't mean to say I'm oblivious to the fact that we could be in a scrap. Things take time. You might have a bad start. I don't think that necessarily is the time to throw the toys out the pram. But you're right, we do need to manage expectations. I think pre-season has changed. Football used to have a very clear summer off, and nobody talked about football.
Yeah.
And I remember in the late 80s, early 90s, a pre-season game might only warrant a couple of lines in the back pages of the Echo, But football's different now. It drives content. It drives, as Bomber said, social media engagement. I think the club have done really well in terms of social media, but a game that in the past might have not really been worth thinking about, you've now got people paying money to go and see, or people paying money to stream. So that there does understandably come an expectation of it being a half-decent game and a half-decent performance. So yeah, pre-season's different now, and it can colour the mood. Excuse me. I just like to stay fairly positive, and I do think we're shaping up for. We're not going to be whipping boys. Is my feeling. We're gonna be in games. We're going to be giving teams a bit of a scare. There'll be times when that doesn't quite work and we can't get a point or we can't get a win. But I think, given the way the club has gone and how they face challenges and how we've got young players who are keen to improve themselves, I think we can go in the Premier League and be confident of us giving a good account of ourselves at the very least.
Yeah, I think we can compete most definitely. The trap that I'm reluctant to fall into is looking at the Premier League this summer and looking at the likes of Wolves losing Cunha and looking at Brentford losing Flecken and Norgard and Mbeumo, and assuming that we're going to be better than all of those teams now, and therefore staying up is going to be that whole bit easier. It's not going to be easier. Brentford have done a very good job. I'll use them as the example. They've done a very good job at losing players and bringing in players that have generally ended up even better. So there's nothing to suggest that just by losing those three, albeit key players, that all of a sudden they're going to finish below Sunderland in the league table this season. I actually see the league being a little bit more fragmented this year, because I think United will improve, Tottenham will improve, and I think that relegation fight will probably be 3 of 8 potentially. And as long as and I think we'll probably be in that for a period of time. There may be a period of time in the new year when we might pull away from that a little bit. But I think we could be sat, for me, I see us sat kind of 12th, 13th, but still looking over our shoulder in March, April time. And, I hope and I think that we will stay up, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be Sunderland or a top 10 club now. We're going to finish 8th and just miss out on the Conference League next season. I don't think it's as simple as that. And just because other teams who we see ourselves, Brighton is another one. Obviously, we kind of see ourselves, we look up to these clubs and want to aspire to be like them in terms of the model, in terms of how they've kind of solidified their position in the Premier League. But just because they've lost a few players doesn't mean that we're going to finish above them, because they've been doing that for 2, 3, 4 seasons and they've still thrived in the Premiership. So I think it's going to be, whilst I'm all for the optimism, I think we need to just make sure we're aware it is going to be a lot tougher than we think. And if I'm wrong and we absolutely piss it and we do finish 8th, then I couldn't be happy to be wrong.
I think you're both very optimistic. I keep having flashbacks about this time last year. I was a little bit later. It was when Ipswich signed Jack Clark, and me and Gav did a podcast. And we're both going, why is he going to Ipswich? They're just going to get relegated. And you had all the Ipswich fans going, what the fuck are you talking about? We're going to stay up. We've got this, that, and the other. We've got this in place. Kieran McKennan's got. And you've obviously got very, not warped perception, you've got a very sort of tunnel vision about what's going on at your club, haven't you? And you see all the positives at your club. And the reality for all of us is that we haven't watched Sunderland play Premier League action for however long. And, if people are like me, you kind of, pay a cursory glance at some Premier League highlights and Match of the Day or whatever now and again. But I've been watching Championship football, if I've been watching other football for the last couple of, or 2 or 3 seasons, because I've wanted to see what the other teams around us are doing, the standard that we need to aspire to in those leagues. So I think there's a risk that we're in for a bit of a rude shock when we actually get up. But I do think if we continue the transfer business that we've done so far and continue doing business in the manner that we have so far up until the end of August, then what you've sort of talked about there is perfectly achievable. I think if the season started now with the squad that we had and we didn't bring anybody else in, I would be a little bit more concerned. But that's very unlikely to happen. But after the Hearts game, the Briss said Isidore Regan-Patterson, who I think Isidore played a little bit in the first couple of games, but Regan-Patterson haven't played in pre-season. Oh, Patterson played the Shields game, did he? Because he had he had the knockoff goalkeeper shirt on, the one that had the different badge on and stuff like that, didn't he? But if those 3 are doubtful for West Ham, which it looks like they are, you've got Triantis, who missed out on Saturday with a bit of a knock. Cirkin, 09, Mundell, Elise, Hielda, they're all going to miss the start of the season. So we've actually got quite a lot of players who aren't actually available to us yet as well, haven't we? And it would seem likely that over the next couple of weeks, some people will go out of the club as well, either permanently or on loan. You've got the likes of Joe Anderson, Pembele, Matete, Abdullah Bar, Rusin, Pavedi. You'd kind of expect all of them to be moved out permanently, wouldn't you? I can't see a scenario where any of them are sticking around unless we just can't get them off the books. And then you've got people who probably could go out on loan. Alexic, I would imagine, would go out on loan. Harrison Jones could go out on loan. Abdullahi, I think he is a candidate to go out for a loan. And interestingly, after the game on Saturday, Jensen Silt said that, reading between the lines of what he said he needs to be playing as much football as possible this season. And there's a very good chance he expects to go out on loan as well, which would kind of indicate that he's expecting 2 or 3 other defenders to come in. But Silt's been one of the standouts for me in pre-season so far. I think he has looked like a sort of proverbial new signing, which in some respects he kind of is, because we haven't seen a great deal of him. But who else has impressed you two in pre-season, Andrew? One particular player who's really stood out?
Well, you've nicked my answer there, Martin, because it would have been it would have been Sealed. I'm pleased to see Huggins is coming back. Again, you could almost treat him as a new signing. But yeah, I think Sealed has done well, given the context behind him. And I'd miss those comments. I'm intrigued by what you've just quoted him as saying there, Martin, because that does suggest to me that he's been led to believe there's other players coming in. I'm not too concerned about those names that you reeled off there, Martin. Not many of those players you would expect to be playing for us next season. So if they're moved on, I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that'll leave us particularly light. Regis Lebris, I think, quite likes having a smaller squad, if possible. So we can afford to lose those players. And if the savings on their wages means we can bring in two or three more players of a higher standing, then so be it. Just as we're talking there, a player I'd like to see a bit more of, and when you've said there who's stood out for me, I wouldn't say he's stood out yet, but I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more of Milan Alexic. My teeth are falling out. I should have just said Joe Bloggs instead. I should have picked a safer name. I wouldn't mind seeing a bit more of him, because I can't get rid of this feeling that there's something there.
I think there's definitely a player there.
Yeah. So I wouldn't mind getting a bit more of a look at him. But yes, in terms of the wider squad, we probably can't afford to lose a few players. Wish them all well. It's not a case of I want to kick these lads out and never think about them again. Most of them, could still have a half-decent career, and I hope they go on to do that. But yeah, we're probably at a point where we need to trim down the numbers, and when we do sign, we're signing players who can come into the first 11 or the first team match day squad, I would say.
And I think Milan Alexic is a really interesting example, right? Because you have this, there's probably an expectation that's 20 years ago, really, rather than now. But the expectation when you sign a new player is that they're going to come in and be ready for the first team. And, I think we are kind of going into this phase now where we're signing young players. Some of them will be ready to come into the first team, but others might need 1, 2, even 3 years of under 21 football, being out on loan before we actually see them really flourish and prosper in a Sunderland shirt. And Alexic falls into that category massively. I think if you can get him out on loan for a season to a championship club and see how he develops and see if he's ready to come in and do something for us around the first team next season, then that's kind of what you need to do. But to expect somebody to come from a foreign country and come straight into the first team at a young age and really hit the ground running, it's a lot to ask of them. And I think this season, Talby falls into that category as well. And I saw some bloody awful criticism of him on social media after the Hearts game, writing him off. What the hell have we done buying this? Useless, whatever. And, even Christian Speakman said we've brought him in for the future. We don't necessarily expect him to play in the first team all the time now, but he's somebody who we can bring in, develop, ease into the first team, and in 1 or 2 years he'll be there. And it's interesting. He gets obviously we brought something like Diarra and Siddiqui. They are going to come into the first team straight away because they're at that level. But the expectations of what individual players are going to bring immediately is potentially different from what they might have been. Look, you look at us spending 20 million euros on the right winger and think he should be coming in and doing the job straight away. And that's a different argument about the club's transfer policy, isn't it? But some of these players we do need to have a bit of patience with and let them develop. But anyway, that's kind of an aside. So go on, Andrew.
No, I think it's a really good point, to be honest. And you're right. What you said earlier about we need to remember that the Premier League has moved on. Signing a player for £20 million back in the day would have been, absolutely
got you Alan
massive.
Shearer.
Yeah. It would have been huge, and you're right. That would have been a kind of you'd think for 20 million you're signing a multiple Champions League winner who's going to waltz into the team. 20 million now in footballing terms might mean that we're looking to a player to bed in over the next few years. And I think with Talby, he's on quite a long contract. I know there's financial reasons for that, but as well, I think it recognises the fact that he could be one for the future. But all you need to do is look at Eliza Mayenda. This time last year,
exactly.
He'd had, from what I gather, quite an unsuccessful loan up in Scotland, and was a player who, you might have been thinking, does he move on? Does he go for a loan? We're now talking about him in terms of, can he make an impact in the Premier League or not? Whereas this time last year, the question was, can he make an impact in the Championship or not? So in a bizarre way, he's moved on.
Exactly,
And there'll be somebody listening to this now, just at the sheer mention of Eliza Mayenda, who starts chanting his name and asking about Sam Fender. That is a player who has come in as a kind of rough diamond, and we are now starting to see them make progress and potentially, I would say, at the very least, be expecting to come on off the bench in games in the Premier League. So he is heading in the right direction. He could have an even more important role than that, and we do need to bear that in mind with some of the signings we make and some of the players already on the books.
No, that's right. And I think if you asked any of us this time last year if Mayenda would score as many goals as he would do in the Championship season, if we want to rely on him as a striker in the Championship, I don't think you got many people who would given him a glowing write-up. So it's that development. Look, I think that's what I actually love about watching us at the minute and watching the players that we bring in, because that level or that rate of improvement can be so rapid as well. You can go 6 months or 3 months and you can really, ramp up what you churn out in terms of performance. But going back to Sealt, Andrew, just in terms of it's in the Sunderland Echo. James Copley has quoted him as saying this morning, for me, the most important thing is to get regular playing time and play loads of games, because it's important after a year of injury. We'll see what the best option is in there. So to me, that really sounds if he's going to go out on loan, because unless something catastrophic happens with our transfer business, I can't see him being one of the first two choice can't see him being one of the two first choice centre halves for next season. But Bomber, in terms of who's impressed you so far this pre-season, anybody else has stood out?
I mean, there's the obvious. Habib Diarra and Noah Siddiqui have been, in the games I've watched, I've not watched every minute of pre-season, I'll admit, but they have been, to come into a new club and put in the performances that they have already, they've been so impressive. I'm so excited to see what they do for the season. There's a slight tinge of sadness that goes along with that, because I feel that's pushed Neil down the pecking order somewhat. But those, and Enzo Lafay as well, that midfield three, Martin, you, me and Gav spoke basically for an hour, and a couple of last week, maybe the week before. And every time we tried to go on to a different topic, we ended up coming back and talking about our centre midfield, that midfield three. They've been absolutely fantastic. I'm so excited to see that kind of triangle grow in terms of their understanding and in terms of their patterns of play, etc. Who else has been? I do struggle to, other than, like I say, Silt and those midfield three, I struggle to find anybody else who has been as impressive. Like, everybody's put in solid performances. Trey Hume has been Trey Hume. Do you know what I mean? He continually just does what we expect of him now, and in some respects, he's victim of his own success. In that the levels of performance that he puts in, we just come to expect. So it's difficult for him to stand out. I do struggle a little bit in the wider positions. I'm struggling to pinpoint where I've been impressed. Patrick Roberts has done okay when he's come in, but and obviously we've spoken about Tolby, and I'm in the same camp as you, that I'm loath to criticise him too much. But I think he's unfortunate that he's being compared to the other new signings who've come in and made an impact and been brilliant straight away. So there's automatically that expectation that he's going to do the same because he's been brought in for a similar fee. Adingra is another one who I think has really yet to get going. And Mayenda as well, as we mentioned earlier, hasn't really started. I'll tell you, if I was going to pick out another kind of area, I would say the young fullbacks who've come on. I don't expect them to feature at all this season necessarily in the first team, but for young lads to come on against the likes of Sporting Lisbon and the likes, and not necessarily look too out of place, I think is credit to them. So in terms of the future for the club and the future in those positions, I think that's good. But yeah, I don't think anybody really could pick anything outside of that midfield three when we're talking about players who've made a good impression so far.
So we are going into the Hull game tonight, which is the start of the sort of second half of pre-season, really. So we've got Hull away tonight. We've got Betis on Saturday. Then we've got two games over the following weekend. We've got Augsburg and Rayo Vallecano. So for the Hull game, and to me, this is now when sort of pre-season ramps up and we start getting a bit more serious. And I think, in a lot of respects, the Hearts game will kind of kicked us into that. It was a tough physical game. We got beat. It's kind of like, the training's over now. This is time to really start ramping up for the West Ham game. So looking at the Hull game tonight, what do you expect to see either in terms of formation, in terms of personnel? It's going to be an interesting test. They've appointed a new manager, so they'll have a bunch of players wanting to impress their new manager. So, Bomber, what do you expect to see tonight?
So I'd a little bit disagree with you, Mark. I think pre-season for the first team starts this weekend coming. I think the whole game is a little bit too soon after the Hearts game to see the likes of a team that is more likely to start at West Ham. I think tonight we'll see a little bit more of the quote-unquote second string. And I think we'll see the likes of Siddiqui and Diarra. I think we'll see those on the bench and come on, but I think it'll be more a sprinkling of players who perhaps didn't quite play so much against Hearts and players who haven't played much at all if they're fit and able to. And that will be their last chance to impress in terms of not necessarily staying at the club permanently, but just last time chance to make an impression on the manager to say, okay, I need this player in some capacity for the season. So I think we'll see a lot of players who, are on the fringes, and we've been speculating as to whether or not they'll be at the club. Like I say, it's for me, it's their last chance to impress, and if they don't take it, then they'll be the ones who are out on loan at least until January, or be leaving the club permanently. And then I think we move into those two Saturday games at least, and the next two Saturdays where we see something that is much more akin to what we'll see on the 16th of August.
No, you're probably right, Bomber. Yeah, I hadn't kind of considered that sort of turnaround time in between the Hearts game and Hull, but yeah, you're probably right in terms of the players who are on the bench on Saturday will probably mostly come into the team. Is that what you would expect to see, Andrew?
Yes, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe somebody like Alan Brown started, for example, or Patrick Roberts, players who featured heavily last season but haven't been starting pre-season games this time around. Like Bomber says, maybe a couple of players who the club are thinking might be due a loan move. I think that's what we'll see tonight. Last season, we had a similar spell of games where I think we played both weekends, and in the middle of that, we played away at Bradford.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
Actually against Bradford. And I know we then went back down for the weekend and used their ground to play.
Year, wasn't it?
Yeah. But when we actually played Bradford in Bradford, it was a you'd perhaps say use the term second string team. So maybe somebody like Zach Johnson might be involved. I don't think he played at Hearts. Now I say that, so
no,
I don't know
he didn't. No,
was there a niggle there?
I don't know, because they talked about Triantis after the game, because obviously he was missing as well. But the impression was that Triantis would be fit for tonight's game. So he's another one who could potentially come in, and it's a great opportunity. As Bomber says, the opportunity for those lads is to come and stake a claim that they can be around the first team this season, as opposed to being farmed out on loan. I actually don't think we've included anyone who the manager would really obviously want to sell permanently. I think the players who have been using have been young players who they see a future at the club for, but they'll be sort of weighing up loan moves. So, as I said earlier, the real action of pre-season starts on Saturday. So this last game against Hull is a nice little warm up. It doesn't really matter, and then the real stuff starts getting serious on Saturdays, doesn't it?
Well, I tell you what does matter. I've had a look at Hull's squad, and I think Mason Burstow's still there. So this whole thing might take a very different tone. all this stuff about, does it count? Is it important if we win or lose, or does the real stuff happen next Saturday when we play Betis at the stadium? If Mason Burstow rattles in a couple of goals tonight, I think we do then need to start panicking about where things are headed.
Well, that's a very optimistic point to leave things on for today, I think. So thank you to Andrew. Thank you, Bomber. Pleasure as always.
Thank you, Mark. Again, probably speak to everybody, or everybody will be listening to me tomorrow as well. But
well, yes, there's a chance we'll jump on after the whole game if we've managed to get streams and all that sort of stuff and pull the bones out of that one. Podcast coming every day. There'll be another reaction pod after the whole game tonight, and we've got a load of things lined up during the course of the week, so keep an eye on all the podcast feeds, and don't forget to visit the website rokerreport.sbnation.com for all of the latest transfer updates and look back at different things that have happened throughout the course of history and opinions on how things are shaping up. So yes, keep an eye on the website. But until we speak again, it's goodbye from us.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
This is Hannah Burner from Giggly Squad. O-Pill is the first over-the-counter daily birth control pill available in the U.S. Let's be real, getting a birth control prescription is not always easy, and it's so much admin. In fact, about a third of women face barriers to access prescription birth control. Between scheduling appointments, missing work, class, or just trying to exist, it's a lot. But now O-Pill is putting birth control in our control. O-Pill is a daily birth control that's FDA approved, full prescription strength, and estrogen free, and 98% effective when used as directed. Grab it online or at most major retailers, no prescription or doctor's appointment needed. So if you're thinking about birth control, check out O-Pill to see if it's right for you. Use code GIGGLY for 25% off your first month of O-Pill at OPILL.com. That's code GIGGLY at OPILL.com. Birth control in your control. We love to see it.